In the Vatican, where prayers continue to pour in for Pope Francis. Senior Vatican official and Philippine Cardinal Luis Tagle led the rosary.
Preghiamo per la salute del Santo Padre Francesco.
While the Vatican prepares for a momentous process, 115 cardinals will enter the solemn and mysterious silence that defines the election of the next pope. Amid this atmosphere of uncertainty and hope, there is a figure whose name resonates strongly: Cardinal Luis Tagle. The relationship between Pope Francis and Tagle has been the subject of speculation, ranging from their close collaboration to the underlying tensions that have accompanied their steps. However, today, Pope Francis has decided to reveal something that could forever transform the future of the Catholic Church. What lies behind this revelation, and how will it affect the power dynamics within the Vatican? Join us as we explore the historic moment in which Pope Francis exposes the truth about his bond with Cardinal Luis Tagle, and how this revelation could change the course of the Church in the coming years. The relationship between Pope Francis and Cardinal Luis Tagle goes beyond a mere spiritual connection. Their bond, although seemingly based on mutual admiration and shared ideals, delves into much more complex terrain, and for some, somewhat mysterious. Since the beginning of his papacy, Pope Francis has advocated for a church close to the poor, a church stripped of adornments, that detaches itself from the rigid traditions that characterize the institution. It is here that Cardinal Luis Tagle's figure becomes key. His focus on simplicity, hospitality, and his deep sensitivity to the needs of the people made him an ideal ally for the Pope. But his influence goes much beyond what many believe. Before becoming a cardinal and holding positions of power within the Vatican, Cardinal Tagle had already demonstrated an innovative pastoral approach in Manila, where he touched the hearts of the humblest classes. The people of the Philippines saw him as a man who was close, accessible, a true leader who not only preached, but lived his message. This genuine connection with the people was what Pope Francis dreamed of for the global church, a structure that not only preaches but becomes one with the most needy. However, the relationship between Francis and Tagle is also marked by elements that raise certain questions. The closeness between the two has been interpreted by some as part of a larger project, an internal revolution within the Catholic Church. In his speeches, the Pope has repeated the idea of a clergy that does not limit itself to offering words but acts, transforms. But is this vision shared by all within the Vatican? Are there forces within the Curia that view this more inclusive and accessible approach to the Church with suspicion? The alliance between Francis and Tagle reached its peak in 2019 when the Pope appointed him prefect of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples, one of the most powerful positions within the Vatican. This position, unofficially known as the Red Pope, grants Tagle considerable influence over the Church's missionary activities worldwide. From this role, Tagle not only has authority over evangelization, but also over the allocation of resources and the strategic direction of missions in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. But this appointment has also raised some eyebrows. Pope Francis, who has been known to challenge the status quo of the Church, may be positioning Tagle as a key figure in the papal succession. Some experts argue that this move could be part of a strategy to ensure that Francis's reformist vision endures in the long run, especially if we consider Tagle's growing influence in the Catholic world. Others, more cautious, suggest that the Pope might be looking for someone to represent him in a future papacy, someone who shares his vision of a more open church, less focused on traditional hierarchical structures. However, behind this apparent consensus of ideals lies a more intricate power play. The relationship between Francis and Tagle is not just a matter of friendship or admiration, it is also a matter of strategy and power within a Vatican that has historically been a battleground of political intrigues. The growing influence of Tagle, who is seen by many as a potential successor to the Pope, could be generating tensions in more conservative Vatican circles that resist Francis's approach. The struggle for the future of the Church seems to be underway, and the strategic moves of key figures like Pope Francis and Cardinal Luis Tagle could hold the key to determining who will truly dominate the Vatican in the coming decades. The relationship between Pope Francis and Cardinal Luis Tagle is much more than a simple ideological affinity. It is a bond that extends into the very heart of ecclesiastical politics, where not only the destinies of the faithful but also the future of an institution with more than 2,000 years of history are at stake. Tagle's decisions, supported by Francis, could completely reshape the structure of the Vatican, and with it, the role of the Church in the modern world. When Pope Francis appointed Cardinal Luis Tagle as prefect of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples, he was not only granting a position of great prestige, but also sending a clear message about the future of the Catholic Church. This move reflected the Pope's growing trust in Tagle, while also underscoring a shared vision of what the Church of the future should be. Tagle's assignment to this strategic position, responsible for coordinating missions in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, is not merely administrative. It is an act of faith in the values that these continents represent for the Church. Pope Francis has made it clear since his election that for him, the future of the Catholic Church does not lie in the traditionalism of the past, but in the Church's ability to adapt to the realities of the modern world. Asia, Africa, and Latin America, regions facing enormous social and spiritual challenges, are seen by Francis as the pillars that will sustain the Church's growth and relevance in the years to come. And Cardinal Luis Tagle, with his deep understanding of the global Church and his closeness to the most needy communities, is the ideal figure to lead this transformation. His role is not only that of an ecclesiastical leader, but also that of a true architect of evangelization on key continents. However, the relationship between Francis and Tagle is much more than a simple professional association. This deep connection between the two leaders is rooted in shared principles beyond institutional interests. Both have been criticized by factions within the Church who see their approach as a threat to the traditional order. Pope Francis has been the subject of constant attacks for his attempts to modernize the Church, while Tagle, though more moderate, has also had to face resistance for his inclinations toward leadership based on closeness to the people and humility. What truly unites these two men is their shared vision, a church not dominated by rigid dogmas, but one that promotes compassion, dialogue, and action. Tagle, like Francis, has always defended the importance of listening to the faithful, acting with mercy rather than with condemnation, and avoiding the polarization that so often wears down the Church. While critics of both leaders call for a church that clings to traditions without altering them, Francis and Tagle, on the other hand, prefer a church that walks alongside the people, adapts, and, above all, preaches by example. But this approach is not without risks. Tagle's growing influence within the Vatican can be seen by some as a strategic move to prepare the cardinal as a successor to Francis. It's no secret that the Pope, though firm in his role, has begun to cede more power to figures like Tagle, which could be interpreted as a preparation for what some perceive as a natural transition toward a future papacy that is closer to the vision of the Church of the Poor that Francis has promoted. Luis Antonio Tagle has emerged as a key figure within the Vatican, but his rise is no mere coincidence.
May I know who among you are really and truly young?
Every move seems perfectly calculated, like a masterful chess move. His appointment as prefect of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples in 2019 was not only a recognition of his religious devotion, but a signal that something larger was underway. This position, one of the most powerful within the Catholic Church, placed him at the forefront of global missions, a strategic control over the souls of millions worldwide. Through his work with Caritas Internationalis, a charity covering 165 countries, Tagle began mobilizing resources and support networks on a global scale. His ability to navigate between disparate cultures and ideologies made him the perfect candidate to lead evangelistic efforts. But is this truly a mission of faith, or is something else being orchestrated? Could it be that Tagle is not only leading missions, but also consolidating power within the Church, laying the groundwork for a future where his influence becomes even more omnipresent? Cardinal Tagle has known how to adapt the Christian message to the different cultures and traditions of the world. Since his appointment, he has restructured the Church's evangelization tactics, focusing on non-Western countries like Asia, Africa, and Latin America. These continents, considered crucial for the future of the Catholic Church, are now the epicenter of his efforts. Is this a move toward a truly global church, or is Tagle starting to weave a network of power that could change the direction of the Church? Tagle has not only been skilled in managing cultural diversity, but has also shown an exceptional strategic mind. With every step he takes, his influence within the Vatican grows, but his focus seems to be preparing the Church for something greater. His popularity is not solely due to his religious devotion, but also his ability to maneuver within a complex power environment, which has made him a key player within the Vatican. Is Tagle really just a religious leader, or is he becoming the centerpiece of a new era within the Catholic Church? Pope Francis has been clear about his vision of a church for the poor and the marginalized, but is this vision a facade for something much deeper? Under his leadership, the Pope has focused much of his efforts on the margins of society. But this is where Tagle comes into play. His humanitarian approach and his work at the helm of Caritas Internationalis have put him at the forefront of this movement. The fight against hunger, poverty, and climate change has been one of his main banners. But is this a genuine charity effort or part of a larger plan to mobilize a global base that supports him? Together, Tagle and Francis seem to be paving the way for a new form of leadership within the Church. A church that not only serves the poor, but could also be seeking to reconfigure the traditional powers that have dominated the ecclesiastical structure. By focusing on the margins, are they paving the way for an internal reorganization within the Church itself, where former hierarchs are displaced by a new elite with a more progressive focus? In Tagle's leadership, one of the most notable practices is listening. He often emphasizes the importance of paying attention to voices that are on the margins, and although this attitude may seem noble, it also raises unsettling questions. In a world where power is built on the ability to impose ideas, Tagle has chosen to listen, connecting with those who have been silenced for centuries. Is this approach a genuine act of love, or is it rather a tactic to gain influence and power among the most needy? Instead of following the traditional hierarchical structure of the Church, where power flows from top to bottom, Tagle is implementing a more horizontal model based on conversation. This technique not only allows him to connect with the base, but also gives him the opportunity to shape the ideas and opinions of those around him. Is he using this practice to strengthen his position within the Vatican, or is he preparing the ground for a radical change within the Church that would place him as the central leader? The Catholic Church is facing unprecedented global challenges, and Pope Francis knows that if they don't adapt, irrelevance is just around the corner. Cardinal Luis Tagle, as one of the most powerful pillars of the Vatican, is playing a key role in this transformation. Beyond his role as a charitable leader, Tagle is in a privileged position to spread the Pope's reforms, especially through his efforts to improve interreligious relations. But is there more at stake here? Is the strategy of Tagle and Francis a way to change the very structure of the Church from within before conservative sectors take full control again? While the Pope advocates for a church for the poor, Cardinal Tagle becomes the global leader of mercy, but with a much more strategic vision than simple compassion. Though Pope Francis holds the visible leadership, the truth is that Tagle is taking positions within the Vatican that place him as a contender in the shadows. As the Cardinal grows more influential, the question of his future role becomes inevitable. Is Tagle the future Pope? Behind their pious smiles and declarations of unity, there is a silent power struggle. Conservatives will not remain passive while reformers like Francis and Tagle try to change the narrative of the Church. What will happen when these internal struggles reach a critical point? Some analysts suggest that Cardinal Tagle could be the leader who defines the Vatican's course for the next few decades. But will it be enough to challenge the power of the conservatives and lead the Church into the modernity they so long for? Pope Francis has launched reforms that have placed the Vatican in the global spotlight. Rejection of clericalism, a decentralized church, and an aggressive approach to global issues such as climate change and migration. But who is really behind these reforms? As the Pope challenges the status quo, he faces fierce resistance from the more conservative sectors. Is Tagle fully aligned with Francis, or is he simply using this opportunity to consolidate his own power within the Vatican? Tagle's growing influence within the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples, a position of great power, is no accident. As he takes the reins of global missions, is he preparing the ground for a future ascension that could forever change the internal structure of the Vatican? The Vatican has never been a place of mere vows and prayers. Politics and power have always been part of the equation. While compassion and interreligious dialogue seem to be the agenda of Tagle and Francis, the truth might be more complex. The Vatican is immersed in a war of ideologies, and while Tagle promotes an approach of unity, many see him as a key piece in a power conspiracy to take control of the future of the Church. Could Tagle's growing popularity not only be a sign of his moral leadership, but a calculated move to place the Vatican under his control, a silent and astute maneuver that could redefine Catholicism as we know it? As the Pope and the Cardinal move forward in their mission to reform the Church, questions persist. Is Tagle the real power behind Francis' throne, or is he creating his own path toward the definitive leadership of the Catholic Church? The Catholic Church faces unprecedented global challenges, and Pope Francis knows that if they don't adapt, irrelevance is just around the corner. Cardinal Luis Tagle, as one of the most powerful pillars of the Vatican, is playing a key role in this transformation. Beyond his role as a charitable leader, Tagle is in a privileged position to spread the Pope's reforms, especially through his efforts to improve interreligious relations. But is there more at stake here? Is the strategy of Tagle and Francis a way to change the very structure of the Church from within before conservative sectors take full control again? While the Pope advocates for a church for the poor, Cardinal Tagle becomes the global leader of mercy, but with a much more strategic vision than mere compassion. Although Pope Francis has visible leadership, the truth is that Tagle is taking positions within the Vatican that place him as a contender in the shadows. As the Cardinal becomes more influential, the question of his future role becomes inevitable. Is Tagle the future Pope? Behind their pious smiles and declarations of unity, a silent power struggle exists. Conservatives will not remain passive while reformers like Francis and Tagle try to change the narrative of the Church. What will happen when these internal struggles reach a critical point? Some analysts suggest that Cardinal Tagle could be the leader who defines the Vatican's direction for the coming decades. But will it be enough to challenge the power of conservatives and lead the Church into the modernity they so long for? Pope Francis has launched reforms that have put the Vatican under the global microscope. Rejection of clericalism, a decentralized church, and an aggressive stance on global issues like climate change and migration. But who is truly behind these reforms? As the Pope challenges the status quo, he faces fierce resistance from the more conservative sectors. Is Tagle fully aligned with Francis, or is he simply using this opportunity to consolidate his own power within the Vatican? Tagle's growing influence within the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples, a powerful position, is no accident. As he takes control of global missions, is he preparing the ground for a future ascension that could forever change the internal structure of the Vatican? The Vatican has never been a place of simple vows and prayers. Politics and power have always been part of the equation. While compassion and interreligious dialogue seem to be the agenda of Tagle and Francis, the truth may be more complex. The Vatican is immersed in a war of ideologies. And although Tagle promotes a unity approach, many see him as a key player in a power conspiracy to take control of the Church's future. Could Tagle's growing popularity not just be a sign of his moral leadership, but a calculated move to place the Vatican under his control? A silent and astute maneuver that could redefine Catholicism as we know it? As the Pope and Cardinal continue their mission to reform the Church, the questions remain. Is Tagle the true power behind Francis's throne, or is he creating his own path toward ultimate leadership of the Catholic Church? Although Cardinal Luis Tagle seems to perfectly fit the Pope Francis's vision of a merciful church centered on the most forgotten, his rise has not been as simple as it seems. In the corridors of the Vatican, whispers of doubts arise, and not everyone is willing to accept Tagle as Francis' successor. Why? because in his leadership style, Tagle is a man of dialogue and consensus, but those qualities which have made him popular clash directly with the more conservative opinions of traditional theology. In a Vatican where power struggles are a national sport, Cardinal Tagle has generated mixed reactions. Tagle is not just a man of good intentions. His reformist drive has placed him at the center of a battle where the Vatican's financial oversight is the key playing field. Pope Francis has tried to clean up the Vatican's finances, a monumental task that has faced fierce resistance. Tagle, with his closeness to Caritas's initiatives and commitment to transparency, has become a crucial piece of this process. But there's a serious problem. This approach puts him in opposition to powerful interests within the Church, those who benefit from the shadows of the Vatican's financial system. Tagle, by attempting to make resources more transparent and directly used for the benefit of the poor, faces a conflict of interest that could be his downfall. The papal succession is becoming a no-holds-barred battleground. Although Francis has never publicly hinted at his successor, Tagle's growing power has sparked a wave of speculation in the Vatican. Conservative figures are watching, and many fear that a papacy under Tagle will perpetuate the reforms started by Francis, leaving behind the old traditions so cherished by the hardest sectors of the Church. On the other hand, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, a key figure in the Vatican's politics and a powerful figure behind its diplomacy, has a very different approach. The two men represent radically opposing visions of what the Church should be in the future. Tagle is the leader of change and modernization, while Parolin and other conservatives are ready to fight tooth and nail to prevent that transformation from happening. Thus, what is at stake is not just the future of the Church, but who will have the final say on which vision will prevail. The Vatican is not just a spiritual center, it is a political battleground. Tagle and Francis want a church focused on the marginalized, a church that opens its arms to the poor, immigrants, and the disadvantaged. But not everyone shares that vision. The traditionalists of the Church, those who fear that Catholicism will dilute in a postmodern world, are fighting with all their might to maintain control of orthodoxy and the Vatican's institutions. Amid these struggles, the Catholic Church faces an existential crossroads. Will it be a modern church, embracing change and adapting to the times, or a traditional church that clings to its dogmas and rigid power structures? Tagle's rise is not just a sign of renewal, but also a symbol of the deep tensions within the Church itself. In this tug-of-war, the decisions made will affect not only the Vatican, but millions of faithful worldwide. The future of Cardinal Luis Tagle seems to be intertwined with the shadows of Vatican power, and it is unclear whether he will be able to maintain his growing influence. Tagle has been a man of the people, a charismatic leader who has won the hearts of progressive Catholics through his close and humble approach. From his years in Manila to his rise in the Vatican, he has shown a unique connection with ordinary people. But in the corridors of the Vatican, where the stakes are higher than ever, power politics plays a crucial role. Tagle is seen by many as the savior of the Church for modern times, a figure who can reconcile change with tradition. However, his humility and inclusive vision have made him vulnerable to the forces operating behind the scenes, those who are willing to sacrifice progress in favor of control and stability. Can Tagle truly break with the old structures? Or is he simply being used as a decorative figure to seal a superficial change while the real power remains in the hands of those who control the Vatican? Meanwhile, the future of the Church is at stake in a delicate balance between those seeking to maintain the traditional system and those who wish to transform it completely. Tagle could be the leader who finally propels the Church into a new era, or he could be the last attempt at reform before the conservative forces take control once more. As Cardinal Luis Tagle emerges as the leader of necessary change for the Church, another contender appears with equal determination: Cardinal Pietro Parolin. This man, the Vatican's Secretary of State, is a key figure in the Vatican's global policies and relations. While Tagle remains firm as a pastoral figure, Cardinal Parolin is the master of the Vatican's complex diplomacy, skilled at navigating the turbulent waters of international relations and the Church's internal interests. But what makes Parolin so feared by Tagle's followers? His Italian origin places him directly at the heart of the Church, in a privileged position that historically gives him formidable power within the Vatican bureaucracy. While Cardinal Tagle challenges traditional orthodoxy with his reformist approach, Parolin remains steadfast, using the institutional structures of the Church to consolidate his influence, even at the expense of the rapid changes Tagle proposes. In terms of style, Parolin has been the architect of a policy of internal reconciliation, a strategy that has brought him closer to those who prefer gradual change. Will this ability to maintain control propel him to the papacy, or will he simply fade before the wave of reform represented by Tagle? The future of the Church is at stake between two opposing forces: reform and tradition. Tagle's candidacy reflects a more pluralistic world, a radical shift in how the Church relates to the world. Parolin, on the other hand, represents the continuity of a Church focused on hierarchy and traditional structures. Thus, the battleground is not just the papacy, but also the path the Church must follow in an increasingly polarized world. Tagle's rise against Parolin puts fundamental questions on the table about who should lead the Catholic Church in the future. As Pope Francis' papacy progresses, the tensions between new ideas and old structures become increasingly evident. Whether the Church moves toward a future of reforms or decides to continue embracing the traditions that have dominated for centuries, Tagle and Parolin will be the two architects of the future. But there's more at stake here. The major power decisions within the Vatican are never simple. The dominance of the Italian clergy remains strong, and Parolin's increasing visibility is a clear sign that Italian influence could be reversing what Pope Francis has achieved. This is an underground power struggle, where the old guard is trying to regain control, while progressive leaders like Tagle attempt to give way to a more inclusive Church. The papal succession is not just about choosing the next pope, but defining the Church that will come, a modern institution or a structure bound to its history.